In just 1 month, this place can claim the lives of 9 people. The number of those who lost fingers due to frostbite, suffered fractures, or sustained injuries is never publicly mentioned. Any other place with such statistics would have been shut down by the police long ago, and those responsible for the deaths would be arrested. But it seems that this place has some sort of license and takes the lives of climbers completely legally. And police climbers too, by the way. But I can't blame all these deaths on the mountain. Take a look at this guy. This is David Sharp, a skilled climber known for his ability to acclimatize quickly at high altitudes and his talent for rock climbing. He conquered several peaks over 8,000 meters and attempted to summit Everest twice. Before I drag out the suspense, he tragically died on the mountain in 2006. But the way and the reason behind his death give me chills. So what really kills people on Everest, and why does the world turn a blind eye to it? To reach the coveted 8,848-meter mark, you must first choose a route. Everest isn't just some hill by the river that you climbed with your granddad as a child. You can't just start climbing from any point or set up your tent wherever you like. 98% of climbers, including all commercial guides, choose either the northern or southern saddle. The other 2% mostly end up dying. If you hear from a friend that they've conquered Everest, firstly, know they just spent nearly $60,000 on this expedition, and secondly, they'll be taking the southern saddle route. This is considered the more popular and accessible route, passing through Nepal. The base camp is situated at an altitude of over 5,300 meters, serving as an acclimatization point. Climbers spend weeks or even months here to allow their bodies to adjust to the lower oxygen levels and reduced pressure. And they do this in almost luxury-like conditions. But don't rush to envy them, as you can die even here. For example, these two tourists overestimated their abilities. The thing is, altitude sickness can strike you at 8,000 meters or at 5,000 or even 2,000 meters. The problem is the oxygen. The higher you go, the less oxygen there is. Symptoms can range from dizziness to brain swelling and even death. But this isn't the only danger at base camp. In 2015, an earthquake in the region triggered a series of deadly avalanches on Everest. A massive snowslide hit the base camp, killing 19 climbers and injuring around 40 others. Despite this, the base camp is considered one of the safest points on the route. Beyond it, the path leads through hell, heading towards the first camp at just over 6,000 meters. The second camp is positioned higher, but what's next? Are you curious to hear about hell? Okay. It's about the Khumbu Icefall, the most dangerous section of the southern route and possibly the entire Everest climb. Many climbers, including David Sharp, whom I mentioned earlier, choose alternative routes because of it. It's a massive river of ice that literally moves down the slope at about 1 meter per day, triggering avalanches, destroying established paths, and creating crevasses over 100 meters deep and 15 meters wide. Most of its victims are Sherpas, the local guides. In April 2014, a group of Sherpas was setting up safety ropes on the Khumbu Icefall when a giant ice block, about 35 meters thick and weighing over 14,000 tons, broke off the glacier. This was later called an ice avalanche. 16 people were buried alive under the ice and snow. In 2023, the tragedy repeated itself, taking the lives of 3 Sherpas. So, while it may seem that Everest itself is responsible for these deaths, there's more. The mountain keeps testing the climber's endurance. After the first camp, climbers need to cover about 3 kilometers to the second camp. What could possibly go wrong? Well, first, the heat. Temperatures here can reach up to 40 degrees Celsius. At this altitude, the sun's rays are less filtered by the atmosphere, and the snow reflects them brilliantly. So brilliantly, in fact, that you could go blind without protective goggles. And that's deadly, because the route is filled with crevasses. Some are visible if you don't lose your sight, but others are hidden under snow, waiting for an unwary climber. It gets worse. Climbers must pass another 2.5 kilometers across a 45-degree icy slope. A slip here equals death, so climbers always have to be tethered to a safety rope. Moving on the smooth ice without crampons, special spikes on shoes, is impossible. But to use them, climbers have to carve tiny steps into the ice with every single move. And this goes on for 6 to 8 hours of climbing. And it doesn't get any easier. The third camp is the last point from which you can be evacuated by helicopter. Above that, helicopters simply don't fly due to the thin air. The air is so thin that on the way to the fourth camp, climbers must use oxygen tanks.
And you won't be hiding them soon, as the camp is located in what's known as the death zone, where climbers can't survive long without supplemental oxygen. And even with it, it's tough. Climbers don't stay there longer than 2 days. And beyond that, as you've guessed, it gets worse. The summit push starts at night and lasts anywhere from 9 to 20 hours, or what feels like an eternity if things don't go well. It begins with a steep climb to what's called the balcony, followed by an even steeper ascent to the southern summit. But this is just a trick. From there, it takes another hour and a half of exhausting climbing along a narrow ridge, sometimes just a meter wide. And now you're at the top of the world. A moment of glory, a few photos, and then what? Exactly. It only gets worse. In May 2014, British climber Daniel Peterson and Pasang Tenji Sherpa were descending from the summit. They had to weave their way around a queue of climbers who were ascending along the same safety rope. Climbers kept having to unclip and pass each other. Suddenly, a roar echoed. A piece of snow broke off just below the summit, at the very ridge that was only a meter wide. What happened to the climbers there? They were swiftly carried down the slope. 2 of them were attached to the safety rope, which saved their lives. But the bodies of Peterson and Tenji were never found. Out of the 342 climbers who have died on Everest over time, more than a third of them perished during the descent. This is officially considered the most dangerous part of the route, whether it's the southern or northern route. By the way, David Sharp, in all 3 of his expeditions on Everest, including his last one, chose the path via the northeast ridge, which passes through China. Why? Because, as I mentioned, it doesn't have the Khumbu icefall. Also, there are half as many people on that route, and you can reach the base camp by car. But that's where the advantages end. The strong winds, low temperatures, and technically challenging transitions, plus the fact that there's absolutely no possibility of evacuating climbers by helicopter, make it a tough route. Moreover, you acclimatize at an advanced base camp situated at around 6,500 meters. On the southern route, the second of 4 camps is at this height. The next 3 camps are even more difficult, and the path to the summit involves 3 steep, sometimes vertical rock steps. But if anyone was prepared for this kind of trek, it was David Sharp. He had successfully climbed the 8,000-meter Cho-Oyu Peak in both 2002 and nearly conquered Gasherbrum too. and also made several attempts to summit Everest via the northern route. He was 100% ready for what awaited him up there.
So, it's unlikely that Everest killed this guy. So what, or rather, who did? Imagine this. You've paid $60,000, spent weeks at crazy altitudes, suffering from a lack of oxygen, spent hours climbing steep ice slopes, and maybe even permanently froze a few toes. And then, on the day when you're supposed to finally reach that damn summit, you're told to turn back just a few kilometers from the goal. So what? You're barely dragging yourself at the back of the group. You're almost out of oxygen, and your frostbitten feet are giving way. But you have to keep going, no matter what. That's exactly why I sometimes think that only, well, let's put it gently, out of their mind people go for 8,000-meter peaks. And often, it's this madness, rather than Everest itself, that leads to their deaths. In 2021, for example, the first death of the season was a climber who died from exhaustion. Swiss climber Abdul Warikh reached the summit, but during the descent, he simply didn't have the strength to get to a safe place. 2 Sherpas were sent to help him, bringing extra oxygen and food, but it didn't help. Later, Warikh's frozen body was found near the southern summit. How is that even possible, you might ask? It's not. If you work 8 hours a day and then watch my videos with a portion of nuggets, it's hard to imagine. Even if you worked 12 hours a day, trained for a marathon, and only ate salads, you still wouldn't drive yourself to the point of fatal exhaustion. But you'd still live your best life at an altitude of about 500 meters above sea level at most. If you were placed at 6,500 meters, you wouldn't even be able to finish watching this video. Even after acclimatization, your body can't fully adjust to the low oxygen levels. No matter how much you rest, you'll never fully recover. And if you're taken to 8,000 meters into the death zone, you'll have to give up even your nuggets. At such altitudes, your body enters survival mode and slows down all processes, including digestion. But you won't last long in survival mode. Consider the dying process already started. Now imagine you've been in those conditions for a day or two, and you have to storm the summit. Climbers pose for the final push already exhausted. It's incredibly hard to tell if they'll have enough strength not only to climb, but also to descend. However, David Sharp was good at pacing himself. He turned back twice, just before the summit of Everest, losing only a few toes. But exhaustion isn't the only danger climbers tend to underestimate. In 2006, Australian climber Lincoln Hall, guess what he did? Didn't guess? Let me tell you the story. Lincoln was an experienced mountaineer, having summited 7,000 and 8,000 meter peaks, and finally added Everest to his list. However, during his descent from the summit, he only managed to drop about 150 meters in altitude before everything went wrong. He literally lost it, and the Sherpas who tried to help him down ended up using up all their oxygen bottles and were forced to leave Hall behind. That evening, his family was notified of his death. The next morning, a group of climbers found Lincoln's body. I would have said I would tell you how they found him, but the body was sitting by the second step of the climb, in an unzipped suit, trying to put on a jacket. More surprising than that, Hall greeted the group with, "I guess you're surprised to see me here." Surprised is an understatement. Hall had spent over 12 hours in freezing conditions without oxygen, water, equipment, or a clear mind, though the latter might have actually saved him.
Just imagine being in such a situation and realizing its hopelessness. The thing is, Lincoln developed high-altitude cerebral edema, one of the most lethal forms of mountain sickness, which causes death within 48 hours or even sooner. The symptoms include disorientation, loss of consciousness, and coordination issues. In other words, it's the worst thing that can happen to a climber in the death zone. Fortunately for Lincoln, the group that found him decided against continuing their summit push and, along with 12 Sherpas who had come from the base camp, helped Hall survive. This happened just a few weeks after the death of David Sharp. It's believed that Sharp was also suffering from altitude sickness before his death, but it wasn't the sickness that killed him.
In 2012, on the southern route, just 250 meters from the fourth camp, the body of 33-year-old Canadian Shreya Shah Clarfin was found. She died during the descent, but her name was not on the list of those who had reached the summit that year. So something prevented her from conquering the mountain. But what? Get ready, because this story shocked even me. Shreya's friends say that summiting Everest was her lifelong dream. She even sold her house to pay for the expedition. But there's one catch. She had never climbed any mountain before. That's right, not just an 8,000-meter peak, but any mountain at all. Her entire preparation for Everest consisted of cardio training and karate lessons. Oh, and I almost forgot, she also wore a 20-kilogram backpack every evening and went for walks. So don't rush to blame Shreya for her own death. Such excessive confidence didn't come from nowhere. Look at the message Shreya received from the company organizing her ascent. You'll hike to the base camp, and once you're there, we'll teach you how to use ladders and other such things. Other such things? I don't know, critical skills for survival, perhaps? Shreya Shah Clarfin paid about $100,000 for her dream, and not a single person who received her money stopped her or said that climbing Everest without experience is a deadly idea. And because of money, more people have been harmed on this mountain than one can imagine. Some try to save money on equipment and nearly lose their lives because of it. Others, like the company that accompanied Shreya, just want to make a profit and turn a blind eye to obvious red flags. And some want to recover every penny they invested in the climb, ignoring not only their own limitations, but the lives of the people around them. Now it's time for me to tell you how David Sharp died. At the beginning of May 2006, Sharp arrived at the advanced base camp on the northern route. After 5 days of acclimatization, he began slowly moving up the route. His rare ability to handle high altitudes well worked in his favor. By the evening of May 13, after waiting for a weather window at the highest camp on the route, the climbers set off for the summit. To this day, no one knows if he reached the top of Everest or turned back just before the peak. The highest point at which he was seen by a group was the third step. However, climbers noted that in the hour it took them to descend, Sharp had only covered about 90 meters. He was next seen by a group of Turkish climbers on their way to the summit. He was sitting in what's known as the Green Boots Cave, a small shelter under an overhanging rock, where, 10 years before Sharp, a climber had died wearing green boots. His body remained on the slope, and those boots became a sort of height marker at around 8,500 meters. This is basically all you need to know about climbers on Everest. The Turkish group that spotted David thought he was already dead, sitting in the snow. Two of the climbers tried to revive Sharp, offering him water and sharing their oxygen. But their own oxygen tanks were almost empty, so they had to descend. The next group, which might have been able to save Sharp's life, didn't. A team of climbers, including the well-known New Zealander Mark Inglis, who had double amputations, was ascending when they saw David in a terrible state. He was sitting in the cave, hands on his knees, motionless. By then, Sharp had suffered severe frostbite and was struggling with a lack of oxygen. Since the climbers were ascending, they had enough strength and oxygen supplies to try and help, but they didn't. Why? Well, the group was filming a documentary for Discovery about Inglis. That day, he became the first double amputee to summit Everest. And since saving Sharp's life wasn't in the filming schedule, they left him in the cave, where he died later that same day. Sharp's mother later said that David told her not to worry about the expedition. "You'll never be alone there. There are climbers everywhere." On May 15, between 18 and 40 people passed by the dying Sharp, according to various reports. Now this would be a dramatic point to end the video and leave you with the thought that on Everest all the mercenary climbers are willing to let someone die for glory. But I wouldn't be Rydell if I didn't tell you that it's actually even worse. So, there's another side to climbers' recklessness that I haven't shown you. Right now, you're seeing snowboarder Marcos Freddy, who's descending on his board like this.
You guessed it right. This is about a snowboarder descending from the top of Everest. In 2001, 22-year-old Marcos Siffredi climbed Everest with a couple of Sherpas to fulfill his life's dream. But the Hornbein Couloir, which was his dream descent, wasn't covered with enough snow, so he had to choose another route, the Norton Couloir. But let's be real, snowboarding down the Norton Couloir is probably not the best idea. So Marco came back the following year to properly descend the Hornbein Couloir like a true snowboarder. Who wouldn't do the same, right? But this time, everything went wrong. The climb to the summit took him 13 hours, and he complained to the Sherpas about his exhaustion. But despite that, and the worsening weather, he headed towards the Hornbein Couloir to snowboard down. After that, he was never seen again. Not even his body could be found. I have just one question. Why? Why did he do this? And there's only one answer. Everest is a cult with devoted followers and insane fanatics. For them, simply summiting isn't enough. They need to up the stakes of madness. You may have noticed I've been telling the story of how groups of climbers passed by David Sharp as he was dying, but I never mentioned where his group was. Do you know why? Because there wasn't one. David Sharp climbed Everest alone. And you know what else he didn't have? Oxygen. He took just 2 bottles with him for emergency situations. As you might remember, it didn't help. Sharp wanted to complete a true ascent without the help of Sherpas, a team, or oxygen tanks. And he didn't lose his mind. Others had done it before him. The climber Reinhold Messner, back in the 80s, climbed Everest alone, without oxygen tanks, and even mapped a new route through the Norton Couloir. So Sharp knew it was possible, and he knew that his life was in his hands. Because rescuing climbers on Everest, especially in the death zone, is not about risk, it's suicide. Such rescue operations are rare. So David didn't really expect anyone else to save him. He was aware of the risks and chose to face them. Nothing could stop him. And this is what scares me the most. Want one more fact?
David Sharp's body stayed on Everest, like the bodies of around 200 other climbers. It's nearly impossible to retrieve bodies from such a height. David even had a personal funeral. 2 Sherpas moved his body from the Green Boots cave to the nearest rock and pushed it down the slope. Why didn't they leave him in the cave like the climber with the green boots? Maybe so the cave wouldn't change its name. What do you think about this? Leave your thoughts in the comments.